I'm Skylar, a 30-something lawyer carving out a name for myself in Boston's cutthroat legal scene. 5 years ago, I stood in a cathedral-style venue in Beacon Hill, my white gown glowing under chandeliers, marrying Ethan Whitmore, the golden boy of New England's most powerful dynasty. The Whitmores were old money, their name etched into Ivy League endowments, museum wings, and charity galas. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. A charming husband, a penthouse overlooking the Charles River, and a future that sparkled like the diamond on my finger. But dreams have a way of unraveling, and mine came apart the moment I saw the truth behind the Whitmore facade. My mother-in-law, Evelyn Whitmore, was the puppet master. She wasn't the warm, cookie-baking type you'd picture in a Cape Cod summer home. No, Evelyn was a force, sharp cheekbones, a silver bob that gleamed like polished steel, and a smile that could slice through you faster than a deposition. Her hazel eyes didn't just look at you, they dissected you, peeling back your secrets like layers of an onion. First, I thought her control was just overbearing maternal instinct. She'd dictate the guest lists for our dinner parties, suggest appropriate outfits for me, always navy or cream, never my preferred crimson, and even nudge Ethan toward the family's sprawling real estate empire instead of the poetry MFA he once dreamed of. But it was more than that. Evelyn didn't just control Ethan's choices, she controlled his mind. I noticed it in the little things at first. The way Ethan's warm, hazel eyes would go blank after one of Evelyn's whispered conversations at those glittering Whitmore Foundation galas, held in ballrooms dripping with crystal and champagne. The way he'd repeat her phrases verbatim like a well-trained parrot when we discussed our future. It wasn't love or loyalty, it was something mechanical, unnatural. Then I stumbled across the first clue, a bank statement buried in a pile of Ethan's papers, showing a $50,000 transfer to a Cayman Islands account labeled consulting fees. The Whitmores' charitable foundation, lauded in every Boston Globe headline, was a front. Behind the photo ops with sick kids and ribbon-cutting ceremonies, they were laundering millions, siphoning donations into offshore accounts, bribing regulators, and greasing the wheels of their empire. The real gut punch came late one night in our brownstone study, the Charles River glittering darkly outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. I found a file on Ethan's old laptop, buried in an encrypted folder he probably didn't know I could access. It was a video from 1998, grainy but clear enough to break my heart. Ethan, barely 12, sat in a dimly lit room at their lake house in New Hampshire. His skinny frame was hunched, eyes glassy, as a man some therapist named Harper Quinn droned commands in a clinical monotone. "You will prioritize family. You will obey." Ethan repeated the words, his voice hollow, while Evelyn watched from the shadows, her face unreadable. That was the moment I knew. My husband wasn't just under her thumb. He'd been programmed, molded into a pawn for the Whitmore legacy since childhood. I wasn't just angry, I was terrified. But I'm a lawyer, trained to build cases brick by brick. So I became a ghost in my own marriage, smiling at galas, playing the perfect Whitmore wife while secretly collecting evidence. Bank records, encrypted emails, recordings of Evelyn's late-night meetings, I hid them in a safe behind a false panel in my closet, my own little war room. Every discovery cut deeper, not just because of the crimes, but because of what they'd done to Ethan. The man I'd fallen for, the one who'd read me Neruda under the stars on our first date, was buried under layers of conditioning. And I was going to bring it all crashing down, even if it meant tearing my heart apart in the process. If you're watching this video right now, thank you for being here. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and share your country with us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the perfect time. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, you won't want to miss what's coming next. These videos aren't just stories. They carry real, powerful life lessons that can inspire you, guide you, and sometimes even change the way you see the world. So join our growing community today, subscribe, like, and stay connected. We're just getting started. For 4 years, I became a shadow in my own life, a hunter stalking prey in the dark corners of the Whitmore empire. By day, I was Skylar Whitmore, the poised lawyer dazzling clients at my firm's sleek downtown Boston office, all glass walls and harbor views. By night, I was a ghost, piecing together a case that would shatter the family I'd married into. My penthouse, with its mahogany floors and panoramic windows framing the Charles River, became my war room. Behind a hidden panel in my walk-in closet, past rows of tailored blazers and Evelyn-approved dresses, lay my arsenal, a waterproof safe holding hard drives, burner phones, and a backup laptop. Every piece of evidence I uncovered was a shard of glass in my heart, but I couldn't stop. Not when I knew what they'd done to Ethan. It started with a discrepancy in a Whitmore Foundation ledger I'd borrowed from Ethan's office. A $3 million donation for a children's hospital had vanished into a shell company in Singapore. Then came encrypted emails I hacked into, Evelyn's orders to offshore accountants, her voice cold and precise in recorded meetings I'd bugged with a device smaller than a dime. The real horror, though, was Harper Quinn, the so-called therapist paid $30,000 a month through a hidden account labeled behavioral consulting. His name appeared in documents tied to Ethan's treatment records, a euphemism for something far darker. I found bank transfers, memos, even a contract outlining compliance protocols. Each discovery was a betrayal, not just of me, but of the man I'd loved. One sleepless night, with rain lashing the windows and the city lights blurring into streaks, I found the video that broke me. Tucked in an old hard drive Ethan had forgotten, it showed him at 12, sitting in a dimly lit room at their lake house in New Hampshire. The walls were paneled in dark wood, the air heavy with the scent of pine and something clinical like antiseptic. Ethan's boyish face was pale, his eyes vacant as Harper Quinn's voice droned, "You will protect the family. You will obey." Ethan echoed the words, his voice a hollow whisper, while Evelyn stood in the shadows, her silhouette sharp against the flickering lamplight. My hand shook as I copied the file to my secure drive, tears burning my eyes. This wasn't just control, it was theft, stealing Ethan's soul piece by piece. Every clue cut deeper, exposing the Whitmores' crimes. Money laundering through fake charities, bribes to regulators, market manipulation that rigged entire industries. But it was Ethan's hollowed-out spirit that haunted me most. Poet who'd once traced constellations with me on a Cape Cod beach was gone, replaced by a puppet jerking to Evelyn's strings. Could have walked away, started over, but love, or maybe stubbornness, kept me in the game. I'd bring Evelyn down, even if it meant torching my marriage. Each night, as I sealed another piece of evidence in my safe, I whispered to myself, "For Ethan. For justice." The cost was my heart, but I'd pay it to see her empire burn. Everything I'd fought for, every sleepless night spent decoding the Whitmores' secrets, led me to my 35th birthday at Hestia Gardens, a rooftop oasis perched above Boston Harbor. The sunset painted the sky in molten gold, its light glinting off flutes of Dom Perignon and clusters of white orchids that cost more than most people's rent. Hestia Gardens wasn't just a restaurant, it was a status symbol, its glass and steel terrace reserved for the city's elite, where deals were sealed and reputations polished. Tonight it was Evelyn Whitmore's stage, and I was her unwilling star. But I'd rewritten the script. Evelyn had texted me days before, her tone cloaked in maternal warmth. "Wear the blue Valentino, dear. Ethan loves you in it." I could picture her dictating the message from her Back Bay mansion, her manicured nails tapping the phone, her mind already choreographing my humiliation. The blue dress was her leash, a signal to play my part as the perfect Whitmore wife. Instead, I chose a Dior gown, crimson as a battle flag, its silk clinging to me like armor. As I stepped out of the town car, the harbor breeze catching my skirt, I felt like a warrior entering the Colosseum. Ethan offered his arm, his tailored navy suit crisp, but his smile was a ghost of the man I'd once loved. His eyes, once bright with mischief, were dull, scanning the crowd like a machine awaiting commands. The terrace was a tableau of Boston's power players, Judge Clara Hawthorne, her pearls gleaming, Senator Grant Prescott laughing too loudly with a real estate mogul, university deans and philanthropists, all smiling with the practiced warmth of predators. Crystal chandeliers hung like constellations, their light dancing across the marble floor. Waiters in black tie glided silently, offering caviar canapes and refilling glasses. Every detail screamed Whitmore perfection, but I saw the cracks. The way guests' eyes darted to Evelyn, seeking her approval, the way no one from my life, my law firm colleagues, my Harvard mentor was here. This wasn't my party. It was Evelyn's trap, designed to paint me as a traitor before I could expose her empire. I played my role, air-kissing socialites and laughing at tepid jokes, my crimson gown a silent rebellion. Evelyn glided through the crowd in midnight Chanel, her silver bob catching the light like a blade. 63, she was still striking, her presence commanding the room like a conductor with a baton. She linked her arm through mine, her Hermes perfume sharp and suffocating, and paraded me past the guests. "Skylar's been such a treasure," she cooed, her voice honeyed but her grip iron. Her hazel eyes met mine, a warning flashing beneath the warmth. "Stay in line." I smiled back, my courtroom-honed composure unshaken, but my pulse thrummed with anticipation. My phone, tucked in my clutch, was ready to record. My evidence package, secured on an encrypted server, was primed to deploy. I was steps ahead. The dinner unfolded with military precision, Evelyn orchestrating the seating, Ethan to my right, her at the table's head, Harper Quinn, the therapist who'd hollowed out my husband, across from me, his clinical gaze dissecting every glance between us. The first course arrived, oysters arranged like pearls on ice, and Evelyn raised her glass in a toast. "To Skylar," she said, her voice carrying across the terrace, "a brilliant wife loyal to our legacy." Crowd murmured approval, but her word loyal hung like a guillotine. I lifted my untouched champagne, meeting her gaze. Game on. As plates were cleared, Evelyn's plan accelerated. She nodded to a waiter, who wheeled out a marble-top table laden with gifts, Tiffany boxes, a Hermes bag, all props in her spectacle. The guests formed a semicircle, smartphones raised, ready to capture the Whitmore myth. Ethan guided me to the table, his hand on my back mechanical, devoid of the warmth I'd once craved. Evelyn handed me a small box in signature Tiffany blue. "Start with this, dear," she said, her smile a mask. I unwrapped it slowly, revealing a platinum bracelet studded with diamonds, a beautiful shackle. "Ethan, help her," Evelyn directed. As he fastened it, his fingers brushed my wrist, cold despite the summer air. I catalogued his vacant stare, the microscopic delay in his movements. He wasn't here. Not really. Then it happened. Evelyn leaned close to Ethan, her lips grazing his ear, her whisper too soft for others but clear to me. "Protect what's ours." His pupils constricted, his jaw tightened, and before I could brace myself, his hand cracked across my face. The slap echoed like a gunshot, sharp and final. I stumbled, my hips slamming into the marble table, and crashed to the cold stone floor. Pain bloomed across my cheek, blood trickling from my split lip, warm and metallic. Terrace fell silent, 50 pairs of eyes frozen, champagne flutes midair. Judge Hawthorne gasped. Senator Prescott's wife clutched his arm. Evelyn stepped back, satisfaction glinting in her eyes, ready to spin her narrative. Poor Ethan, driven to the edge by his treacherous wife. They expected me to crumble, to beg or flee. But I didn't. Lying there, the marble chilling my skin, I felt a strange clarity, like the moment before a verdict. Then it came, a laugh, low at first, bubbling up from somewhere deep and defiant. Grew, sharp and resonant, slicing through the stifling air like a blade. I pushed myself up, blood staining my crimson gown, and let the laughter ring out, wild and free. Ethan froze, his hands still raised, horror dawning in his eyes as if he'd woken from a trance. His gaze darted to his palm, then to me, his breath hitching. "Skylar," he whispered, voice cracking, the first flicker of the real Ethan I'd seen in years. Evelyn's composure fractured. "Ethan, help her up," she snapped, her voice shrill. "She's unwell." But he didn't move. Crowd shifted, phones still recording, their faces a mix of shock and unease. I stood, dabbing my lip with a linen napkin, the blood blooming like ink on snow. "Perfect timing, Evelyn," I said, my voice steady, carrying across the terrace. "You couldn't have scripted it better." Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear betraying her. She'd miscalculated. This wasn't her stage anymore, it was mine. My phone vibrated in my clutch, confirming the dead man switch had activated, triggered by the GPS registering the impact. My evidence, bank records, recordings, Harper Quinn's conditioning files was streaming to the FBI, SEC, and the Boston Globe. News alerts began chiming on guests' phones, soft at first, then a chorus. I turned to the crowd, my split lip throbbing but my resolve ironclad. "You've just witnessed the Whitmore conditioning program," I said, my courtroom voice cutting through their murmurs. "And now, so will the world." I stood, blood staining the crimson Dior gown that clung to me like a second skin, the metallic taste sharp on my tongue. My cheek throbbed where Ethan's hand had struck, but I felt alive, electric, as if the pain had burned away the last of my fear. Terrace at Hestia Gardens was a frozen stage, Boston's elite clutching their phones, their manicured fingers still recording, their faces a gallery of shock and calculation. Crystal chandeliers swayed faintly in the harbor breeze, casting fractured light across the marble floor. The white orchids, Evelyn's signature, seemed to wilt under the weight of the moment. I looked into the crowd, Judge Clara Hawthorne's pearls clutched tightly, Senator Grant Prescott's jaw set, his wife whispering urgently, and I knew this was my courtroom now. "You've just witnessed the Whitmore conditioning program," I said, my voice steady, honed from years of swaying juries. For decades, Evelyn Whitmore has orchestrated a criminal empire, money laundering, bribery, market manipulation, all hidden behind the facade of her charitable foundation. Gasps rippled through the crowd, soft but sharp like the clink of champagne glasses. "And the worst of it," I continued, turning to face Evelyn directly, "is what she's done to her own son. Ethan's been programmed since he was a child, conditioned to obey her every command, his free will stolen by a so-called therapist named Harper Quinn. Evelyn's face was a mask of porcelain, but cracks were forming. Her hazel eyes, usually so piercing, flickered with something I'd never seen in her before, fear. Her silver bob caught the chandelier light, but it no longer looked regal, it looked brittle, like spun glass about to shatter. "Skylar, you're unwell," she said, her voice straining for control, but the tremor betrayed her. "This is a family matter, not a spectacle." She gestured to the crowd, trying to rally her allies. "Let's not ruin such a lovely evening." But I was done playing her game. "A family matter?" I echoed, stepping forward, blood still dripping from my lip onto the linen napkin I held. "Is that what you call laundering $340 million through fake charities? Or paying Harper Quinn $30,000 a month to turn your son into a puppet?" I pointed to Harper, who stood near the edge of the terrace, his clinical detachment crumbling as he shifted uncomfortably in his charcoal suit. "Every one of you has a phone," I said, addressing the crowd. "Check your notifications. Right now, my evidence, bank records, recordings, Quinn's conditioning files is hitting the FBI, the SEC, and the Boston Globe." As if on cue, a phone chimed. Then another. A cacophony of alerts erupted like a flock of startled birds. Guests glanced at their screens, their expressions shifting from confusion to dread. I caught glimpses of headlines flashing across displays. Whitmore Foundation accused of massive fraud. Psychological manipulation scandal rocks Boston elite. My dead man switch, triggered by the GPS in my phone registering the force of Ethan's slap, had done its job. Years of evidence, meticulously gathered, were now flooding the world. The terrace, once a glittering shrine to Whitmore power, felt like a sinking ship, and I was the one who'd blown the hull. Evelyn tried to pivot, her voice rising. "This is absurd. Skylar's been under stress, fabricating stories to undermine our family." But her words were drowned by the growing buzz of phones and whispers. Judge Hawthorne was already slipping toward the exit, her face ashen. Senator Prescott's wife tugged him away, muttering about damage control. Power structure Evelyn had cultivated for decades was fracturing before my eyes. Then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. Ethan, still standing where he'd struck me, turned to his mother. His face was pale, his hazel eyes wide with a mix of horror and clarity. "What did you do to me?" he asked, his voice trembling, raw, like a man waking from a long nightmare. Crowd stilled, sensing something profound. He took a shaky step toward her, his hands clenched. "Those sessions at the lake house. The headaches every time I questioned you. The way I couldn't think straight after your talks. What did you do?" Evelyn's composure cracked fully now, her lips parting in a rare moment of speechlessness. "Ethan, darling," she began, reaching for him, but he flinched away. "You needed guidance. The family legacy." "Guidance?" he cut her off, his voice rising, jagged with pain. "You turned me into a machine." He pressed his palms to his temples, as if trying to hold his fracturing mind together. "I remember the summers at the lake." Harper's voice over and over. "The pills that made everything blurry." His gaze shifted to me, and for the first time in years I saw him, the Ethan who'd read poetry under a Cape Cod sky, not the hollow shell Evelyn had crafted. "Skylar," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I loved you, didn't I? Before they took it all away?" My heart twisted, the sting of my split lip fading under the weight of his words. Despite the pain, the betrayal, I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, Ethan," I said softly. "You did." For a moment, the terrace, the crowd, even Evelyn vanished. It was just us, two broken people caught in her web. But I couldn't let myself soften, not yet. The war wasn't over. I turned back to the crowd, my voice steady despite the blood and tears threatening to surface. The evidence now in the authorities' hands includes recordings of Ethan's conditioning sessions, bank transfers to shell companies in the Caymans and Singapore, and proof of bribes to federal officials. "Harper Quinn," I said, locking eyes with the therapist, who was now visibly sweating, "your behavioral maintenance payments are documented. Care to explain Project Sentinel to the FBI?" Harper's face drained of color, his clinical facade collapsing. "That's privileged information," he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. Crowd was turning on him, their phones now searching for more details as news alerts multiplied. Evelyn, sensing her empire crumbling, made a final desperate play. "Skylar's lying," she shouted, her voice shrill, her hands clutching her diamond necklace as if it could anchor her. "She's a disgruntled wife, jealous of our success." But Ethan's voice cut through hers, quiet but piercing. "No, Mother," he said, stepping closer to her, his eyes blazing with a clarity I hadn't seen in years. "She's telling the truth. I remember you told Harper to make me forget, to stop me from wanting my own life." He turned to me, his face crumpling with guilt. "I hate you, Skylar. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop. They made me." "I know," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "It wasn't you, Ethan. I wanted to reach for him, to bridge the chasm between us, but this wasn't the time. Not with Evelyn still scheming, not with the FBI on their way." The elevator doors slid open, revealing two men in dark suits, FBI agents, their badges glinting under the chandeliers. Agent Rivera, my contact for months, gave me a subtle nod as he approached Evelyn. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his tone clipped, "we have a warrant for your electronic devices and documents." Evelyn's hand trembled as she took the paperwork, her eyes scanning for an escape that didn't exist. Around us, the terrace descended into chaos, guests whispering, servers frozen, phones buzzing with headlines. The Whitmore empire was imploding, and I stood at its center, blood on my gown, triumph in my veins. But as I watched Ethan sink into a chair, his hands covering his face, I felt no joy. His question echoed in my mind. "I loved you, didn't I?" The man I'd married was in there, buried under years of conditioning, fighting to break free. I'd won this battle, but the war for his soul and maybe mine was far from over. 6 months after that night on the Hestia Gardens terrace, I sat in the federal courthouse in Boston, its oak-paneled walls and fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the glittering world I'd once inhabited. Evelyn Whitmore stood before the judge, stripped of her Chanel and silver bob, her prison jumpsuit sagging on her frame. She held her head high, lips pursed in defiance, but her eyes betrayed her, a dull, defeated glint where power once burned. The gavel fell, sentencing her to 28 years for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. Courtroom buzzed, journalists scribbling furiously, former Whitmore allies shrinking in their seats. I felt no triumph, only a quiet resolve. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about reclaiming what had been stolen. Ethan was absent, recovering at a specialized facility in Vermont, where therapists trained in deprogramming helped him untangle decades of manipulation. His journey was raw, messy, a battle to reclaim the man buried under Evelyn's conditioning. One afternoon, a courier delivered a letter to my new office, a modest space in South End filled with books and sunlight. Ethan's handwriting, unsteady but deliberate, filled the pages. "Skylar," he wrote, "you didn't just save yourself, you saved me. I'm starting to remember who I was, who I might be. I'm transferring my trust fund to your foundation. It's the least I can do." The letter shook in my hands, not from anger but from hope. That trembling script was proof. The real Ethan was fighting his way back. I'd left my corporate law career at the firm's glass tower, trading power suits for a mission. I founded the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to victims of psychological manipulation. Our South End office became a sanctuary for former employees, disinherited heirs, and others crushed by families like the Whitmores. I spent my days in courtrooms, fighting for their freedom, and my evenings speaking at community centers and universities, sharing my story. Not to boast, but to warn. Invisible chains, coercive control, gaslighting could bind anyone. One spring afternoon, leaving the courthouse, sunlight filtered through my hair, warming my face. I smiled, not the practiced grin of my Whitmore days, but the smile of a woman who'd reclaimed her life and was helping others do the same. Ethan and I were like two lines that crossed once, fiercely and briefly. I visited him once, at his facilities garden, where crocuses pushed through the soil. He looked thinner, his navy sweater loose, but his hazel eyes held a spark of the poet I'd loved. "I don't know who I am yet," he said, voice soft, "but I want to find out." I nodded, keeping my distance, unsure if our paths would ever align again. I hoped he'd find his true self as I had, but I'd learned to let go of promises the Whitmores couldn't keep. Reflecting on this journey, I've drawn 5 lessons I want to share with you. First, trust your instincts. When something feels off, like Ethan's vacant stares, don't dismiss it, dig deeper. Second, knowledge is power. I built my case with evidence, not emotion, and that gave me control. Third, resilience is your armor. The slap, the betrayal, they hurt, but I laughed because I refused to break. Fourth, justice heals. Exposing the truth didn't just free me, it gave Ethan a chance to heal too. Finally, freedom is worth fighting for. Whether it's your mind, your heart, or your future, never stop reclaiming what's yours. My work with the foundation is just beginning. Every case, every client is a step toward dismantling systems of control. That spring day, as I walked down the courthouse steps, Boston's skyline stretching before me, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't just Skylar Whitmore, the lawyer or the wife, I was Skylar, a woman who'd turned pain into purpose. If this story moved you, I'd love for you to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of empowerment and truth. Your support helps us build a community where no one has to fight alone. Thank you for being here, and let's keep shining a light on the invisible chains that bind us all.